Hello dear students, welcome back to my YouTube channel, Your English Teacher. I am Ritu Bhandari and today we will continue with the explanation of Chapter 7, Evans Tries an O-Level. This is the 7th chapter of your textbook Vistas for Class 12. In the previous video, I had described and explained the pages from 1 to 7 of this chapter. So I hope when you visit this video, you must have by now gone through those pages and also taken help from the videos that I had posted. So let us go to that part of the text where we had left. So let's start from there. This is page number 8 of the text. So here I was explaining in the previous video that it is important for the reader to keep an eye open and compare the contents of McClary's suitcase. McClary's suitcase, what all did he have earlier when at 8:45 he was supposed to leave his home? And now when he is frisked by the governor, what all is found in his suitcase? Everything was fine except for a semi-inflated rubber ring which seemed to catch his attention. And then it seemed as if Jackson wanted to make fun of him, but then Jackson realized that was an unrequired comment because McClary explained that he was suffering from hemorrhoids. Hemorrhoids is piles, and when you suffer from piles, you cannot sit on a chair for a long period of time. And here McClary was to sit to invigilate a 3-hour examination, so he had brought that semi-inflated rubber ring to sit on during the invigilation. But in retrospect, it was this small semi-inflated rubber ring which was carrying the blood which was smeared on McClary's head. It seemed as if he was injured. We find Evans as the injured McClary who stayed back, all smeared with blood. From where did that blood come? The governor could have no idea about it till Evans explains it to him towards the end of the chapter. The semi-inflated rubber ring had actually carried the blood, and that too it was mixed with pig's blood to refrain it from coagulating, from becoming thick, so that it could freely flow out of the rubber ring. So after this hitherto amiable demeanor, McClary's hitherto amiable demeanor refers to the fact that till now McClary seemed to have a pleasant personality, but it was slightly ruffled because of the tasteless exchange of words with Jackson. When Jackson had made fun of him about why did he require a semi-inflated rubber ring, was he thinking of going for a swim? So then his so seemingly pleasant demeanor seemed to vanish, and he explained why he was carrying it, and then Jackson was a bit embarrassed, and all he did was he allowed McClary to leave, just without the paper knife, but definitely with the semi-inflated rubber ring. Why did that happen? Now this was one thing that could have refrained Evans from escaping. If we look at it, if he had not had this one thing, he would not have been able to pose as if he's been injured. So McClary was sent back into Evan's cell and they had to start the examination. Now it was 9:18 and McClary had already begun with the examination and asked Evans what was the watch. So it was simple instructions that were given at the beginning. McClary tells him that 5 minutes to the completion of the examination, he will make an announcement that 5 minutes are left and he should write certain details related to the code of the paper. 021-1 on the left hand corner and number 313 and 271. Those who've read the chapter will understand this refers to the coordinates on the Oxfordshire map, and these were actually the coordinates of where the Golden Lion Hotel was. So it's important to have read the chapter beforehand. That's why, because I'll be referring to all these things in between. So at 9:20 the exam is going on. These are certain things that had been taken care of by the governor. He had instructed Stephens to stay inside the cell, whereas Evans now objects to that and he says, I can't give an exam with someone breathing down my neck. Now why does that happen? Now Stephen, had he stayed there and had the governor not given in to Evans' request to remove him from the inside of the cell, then also the escape would not have materialized. So when there are questions like whether the governor is a good for a giggle, gullible governor, one of the points is this also, that when the governor knew that Evans is such a threat to his image, because he's already escaped from prison so many times, what was the need to instruct Stephens to stand outside the cell? He should have continued to allow Stephens remain inside the cell. Now at 9:25 there's a lot of calm and the governor could hear all the exchanges in the cell through the transmitter he had fixed in the cell. And at 9:40 there was a call from the examinations board. The call from the examinations board was to deliver a correction slip to Evans. Now the governor was definitely paranoid and he thought that this could also be a fake phone call. He did think that it could also be some kind of a signal that is secretly being sent through this message. So what did he do? He acted smartly, he was a bit proactive, and he immediately called back the examinations board so that he could check whether the call was actually from the examinations board or not. Now when he called back, the line was engaged, and since it was engaged, he came to a conclusion that the examinations board call was actually being carried out and Jackson was talking to the assistant secretary through that call. So he came to a conclusion that the correction slip call was for real. But when we look at the whole story, we'll find that this was actually one of the loopholes in the governor's vigilance. Just because the examinations board call line is engaged, it does not mean that it is necessary the secretary would be talking to Jackson only. It could be busy for some other reason. So later onwards he realizes his mistake, and therefore when we answer the question, good for a giggle, gullible governor, whether he was or not, we need to understand that this was one of the flaws. Okay? 2 minutes later he heard some whispered communications in the cell, and then McClary's broad Scots voice. This is usually mentioned to in a very subtle manner, but the Broad Scots accent has a great role to play, because he's not supposed to overdo the Broad Scots accent even when he walks out. Who walks out? The McClary who walked in only walks out with Stephen, and he is supposed to speak in a manner that could raise some doubt. When Stephen looks back again, he realizes that there was something weird in the way McClary spoke. So the Broad Scots accent is important. Towards the end of the chapter, we realize that the prison van in which he had escaped, the driver of that prison van also spoke in a Broad Scots accent. So the driver of the van was the same McClary who impersonated the real McClary and had come to invigilate the exam. So these two people were the same. So coming back to the situation right now, the scene right now, McClary is speaking to Evans and telling him to write down specific corrections, and that correction is, all this is being heard by the governor through the transmitter that is fixed in the room. And he talks about some golden line, etc. Now later onwards we'll realize this is actually the name of the hotel where he has to reach. That was one reason why the correction slip had to be sent. So yes, the governor was right in understanding that definitely this is some clue that is being sent, and the clue was which of the golden lines was Evans to go, despite he knew the coordinates of the place. The coordinates of the place, around that also there were a number of golden line hotels. So this was the name of the hotel where he had to go. Around those coordinates, the coordinates referred to, I'll take you back, 0211, and the other number that he had referred to, if we look back over here, 313 and 271, these were all the coordinates of the location of the hotel. Which hotel? The name was given through the correction slip. It was the Golden Lion. Now, this is something that the governor was listening to, and he listened and smiled. Why did he smile? Because he himself had learnt German at some level of his schooling. He knew about the agreement of adjectives, and it seemed through McClary's sound of things that McClary also had an impressive pronunciation of German language. But Evans, he was doubtful, because he didn't think highly of Evans, that he would have mastered German language, and especially what adjectives in German language were. Now the phone rang again, the magistrate's court, and this time they wanted a prison van. This is the same prison van which is used to escape in the end. Again, the governor was wondering whether it would be a hoax or not. He was again feeling paranoid, but actually he thought that he was going, his imagination was going bizarre, and he decided not to follow his instinct, and he thought that this is going too far. But what was the reason? Because it was Evans. Evans is known to have broken the jail so many times. That's why he starts doubting everything, but he puts it aside. That's why we can say he was good for a giggle. He did not listen to his conscience, despite the fact that Evans has proven to be pretty smart every time. Now, this conversation is happening between McClary and Evans. McClary tells about the correction slip. And now for the first quarter of an hour, Stephen had dutifully peered through the peephole. Now Stephen was asked to stand outside, and after every 2 minutes he would look into the peephole. This is a very important portion, because what do we see? Every time he looked through the peephole, it was usually the same scene. He said there was no point looking at it, because every time he looked through the peephole, Evans was sitting in a specific manner. His pen was always between his lips. He was always staring straight in front of him towards the door and seeking, it seemed, as if some sorely needed inspiration somewhere, as if he was thinking about an answer. But this was his position every time. So Stephen used to think, what is the point of looking into the door so many times? And McClary also used to sit in the same manner. He was a little slightly away, askew is away from the table, and his face was in a semi-profile manner. And his hair, he noticed, was very amateurly clipped pretty close to the scalp. So McClary had clipped his hair. His eyes behind, he had small hair. His eyes behind the pebble lenses started peering, peering short-sightedly at the Church Times. So he was always reading the Church Times. And his right index finger, it was hooked beneath the narrow clerical collar. The clerical collar, if you understand, is only that white collar and a part of it which covers the chest area. That white collar was always where his index finger was. And the fingers of his left hand were very meticulously manicured, slowly stroking the short black beard. So this was always McClary's position, and that was always Evan's position whenever Stephen looked at it through the peephole. Now, if you've read the chapter, these were signals, because Evans was facing the peephole, the door, and whenever Stephen would look, he would sit in this manner to send a message to McClary, who had his back towards the door. Why was a message required to be sent? Because McClary was to hand him over things in between so that he could impersonate as the McClary who would remain inside injured. Okay? So that message had to be, that hint had to be given to McClary every now and then. At 10:50 a.m., again the receiver crackled to life. That means there was some commotion in the cell, and the governor realized that he had almost forgotten that Evans was giving an exam, and therefore there was a conversation in which Evans asks McClary if he could put some blanket around him, because it was quite chilly there, bit parky in here. And then McClary said, yes, you may. So Stephen, after 10:45, at 10:51 again, he saw through the peephole and he realized that Evans had a blanket around him. Now that was something again that Stephen was a bit paranoid about, because he thought maybe that blanket could be used as a way of injuring McClary and suffocating him, and therefore bargaining Stephens to open the door. But then he realized that Stephens realized that maybe he's being too judgmental, and he realized that this side of the prison there was no heating, and even during the summer months it could get really chilly in some of the cells. So he decided that this is not something to be conveyed to the governor, that Evans is wearing a blanket. So the governor doesn't know about the blanket thing, because he's only listening to it. The transmission is only of voice and not of video. At 11:20 again, there was some noise across the governor's office, and he realized that only 5 minutes were remaining, and McClary had announced that 5 minutes were left. So the governor still thought that there's something very, very strange, that everything seems to be in control. and immediately at 11:20 he reached for the phone once more. Now, as a reader, when I read this line, he reached for the phone once more, my immediate connection and conclusion is that he reached for the phone, and at 11:22 Jackson received a call from the governor stating that Stephens was required to speak with the governor. So as a reader, it seems as if the governor had called up Jackson to inform Stephen to talk to him. So Stephen leaves his position outside the cell door, goes to attend the call, which assumedly is by the governor, and the governor tells him that it is Stephen who has to accompany McClary to the main prison gates. Now Stephen was to make personally sure that the door was locked after McClary walked out. So Stephen felt very, very important because he is the junior of the two officers on duty. So he thought, good Lord, I have been given this responsibility. But actually, when we look back, this call has not been made by the governor. This call at 11:22 has been made by an accomplice of Evans who is outside the prison. And he has informed Stephen to personally make sure that McClary is walked out of the main prison gates. Why does he do that? Because Stephens is the junior officer. He may not be that alert and vigilant. Jackson would. So when McClary had to walk out after shedding off all the extra clothes that he had brought and after giving it to Evans, he would have definitely been traced that he is not the McClary who had walked in. So at 11:25, the governor heard the final exchanges, and here it is Stephens who is going to walk him out. McClary tells him, please stop your writing, etc., etc., and all that is over. And then McClary says goodbye to Stephens and starts walking towards the gate. Over here, where I had told you that he did definitely see some change, because over here it seemed, I kind of think he distinguished himself, means that McClary answered to Stephen's question, how did Evans do the exam? And when he answered that question, McClary's Scots accent seemed broader than ever. Later onward in the chapter, it says that when Evans is revealing the whole plot to the governor, he says that McClary was advised not to overdo the Scots accent, so that it should not look that glaringly different. And what else did Stephen realize? That his long black overcoat, reaching almost to his knees, fostered the illusion that he had suddenly grown slimmer. Now, why would he grow slimmer? Because even though he is the same McClary who walked in, he has grown slimmer because he was wearing two overcoats. One of the overcoats will be handed over to Evans, was handed over to Evans under the blanket. That is why the McClary who stayed in, the injured McClary, was able to dress up like McClary who walked out. Stephens was very happy that the governor had asked him and not Jackson to see McClary off the premises, and all in all, the morning had gone pretty well, but something told him he must go and look at the cell again and check on Evans. And here the writer is given an analogy where he says that, like the woman who could really never convince herself that she's locked all the doors. So he re-entered D wing, made his way along to Evans' cell and opened the peephole once more. Oh no! So he goes back and he realizes that, see, he realizes that McClary has been injured, but the writer has given us a very good hint over here. He says, there sprawled back in Evan's chair was a man. For a semi-second, Stephens thought it must be Evans. Now, as a reader, I might overlook this, and actually, it is Evans. The McClary, the injured McClary left behind is actually Evans. And what was around him? A grey regulation blanket slipping from his shoulders, and the front of his closely cropped, irregularly tufted hair awash with fierce red blood which had dripped already through the small black beard. Now, why was it like this? Because remember, the closely cropped hair, that is what Evans had been doing before all the sharp objects had been taken away. And why did he have to do that? Because he had to match his hair with the McClary who had walked in. Remember, when Stephen looks at McClary through the peephole, he finds that there's a special mention of his closely cropped hair. So there's an irregularly tufted hair awash with fierce red blood. So it's all covered with blood. How does this blood come? Where does it come from? The governor could not understand, and it is later in the story when Evans says that the blood had been hidden in the small tube. And therefore, it is without much of thinking, it was deduced, it was accepted that the injured man who had stayed behind was actually McClary, whereas it was actually Evans. Okay, this has not come to their notice till now. And McClary creates a lot of chaos here. He doesn't allow anybody to think. And this McClary, who had stayed back, was actually Evans himself. He was posing as McClary, and the McClary who had walked out was the real McClary who had walked in. So, the injured McClary tells the governor that he has a clear idea where Evans has gone, and he shows him the German question paper. And then the governor looks at it and he realizes that a photocopied sheet had been carefully and cleverly superimposed over the last page of the question paper. So here he realizes, the governor, that he should have learnt German language when he had the time, just like Franz did and the old villagers did in the chapter, the last lesson. They did not learn French when they had the time. So over here he realized that he should have paid attention at that time, and then he would have been able to translate this. But still, he could understand a little bit of it, in which he could realize that there was a indication that the last 3 minutes before the examination was very, very important. Don't hit him too hard. Remember, he's a minister, and don't overdo the Scots accent when. So it seemed as if the last 3 minutes was the time when there was a call that seemed to be from the governor for Stephens to accompany McClary out of the prison. So this is where he had to change to the final exchange of clothes and impersonation. And he is a minister, and don't overdo the Scots accent. That's what I was telling you about. The Scots accent becomes very important. So he realizes that at this time, what is the conclusion they come to? The governor comes to a conclusion that the McClary who walked out was Evans. And he comes to a conclusion that the McClary who stayed in was actually injured McClary. And it is the other way round. He gets to know that later onwards. How do we get to know that later onwards? Because here the injured McClary who stayed back, he is in charge now. He seems to know everything, and he tells the governor that he knows where Evans has gone to. And therefore the superintendent Carter, Detective Carter, is called, and then he is turning to McClary and is a bit worried what has happened to him because he seems to be really injured. And then McClary says that you better take me to Elsfield Way. I know where Evans has gone. And then Carter looks to the governor for some kind of a guidance. But the governor here doesn't seem to know anything, doesn't seem to be in charge. And then what does he do? He simply allows him to go as per McClary's instructions. And he tells Carter that you better follow what McClary is saying, because he is the only one who seems to know what is happening. So Elsfield Way, he jumps into the car, and Carter opens the back door and McClary jumps into the car, and then he gives direction to Carter that take me to Elsfield Way. From Elsfield Way, they should take the Headington roundabout. Now, what was the reason they wanted to go to the Headington roundabout? Because they could understand what was written on the question paper. Neurobrand, Eurogred, there were certain terms here, and then he realized it was actually Newbury. So it was through the Headington roundabout that they would go to Newbury. This was the deduction by the governor. Now, this was something that McClary, the injured McClary who sat in Carter's car, seemed to convey. That was his plan. Now, as they drove out, the governor turned to Jackson and Stephen, and then they realized in that altercation that he never rang Stephen and never gave directions to Stephen to accompany McClary out. He then realizes that it was somebody through the examinations board that was connected, that was an accomplice of Evans, who made that call to ensure that they would be free for the last 2-3 minutes to make the final exchanges, to make the final changes in their attire and assist him in impersonating as McClary. So here, this is all the scolding that they are getting, and then he is still a bit confused because he did not know how did he get hold of something so sharp that could cause such an injury and so much of blood spilled. But he later realizes that blood was actually brought in that tiny tube which McClary was bringing. And he did not have, the false beard was definitely a part of his paraphernalia, which McClary was wearing 2 coats. He had a false beard and a pair of spectacles in that case which, remember, when he was frisked, there was a hard object that Jackson found, and he said that it was his extra pair of spectacles. In that box he could have kept the false beard as well. And the dog collar were 2 dog collars he was using. He was also wearing 2 coats. That's why he was looking thinner when he was accompanied outside by Stephens. So the governor is finding it very confusing at this time, but as a reader I know it now that I've read the whole story. So the prison van was also there, and he told the prison van to take him to Headington roundabout, and he came to a conclusion, Newbury, and that's where he thinks that the injured McClary has gone. So over here we will find that he is really upset, and he says that they will, with the help of the Chief Inspector Bell, they will definitely be able to catch him. And he makes a point over here, well, almost all of them make their mistakes somewhere along the line, and here also Mr. Evans had made a mistake by leaving the question paper behind, and that then he would be doing his once more. His once more refers to his term in prison. Now, what was the mistake that Evans made by leaving the question paper? But it was actually not a mistake made by him. because Evans had deliberately left the question paper to misguide the governor. So then suddenly there was a call from the Superintendent Carter, and he told him that McClary had gotten off at Elsfield Way because from there he could not find him after the Headington roundabout. So the governor said fine, but he felt it important to convey to Carter that he knows where Evans has finally gone, and it is Newbury. And he was not just a good for a giggle gullible governor. Now this is a bit debatable, and throughout the chapter I've been telling you whether you can say for or against it depending upon how you substantiate it from the text. So he says that he conveys his thank you to Carter, and he decides to call Radcliffe Hospital, where the ambulance was supposed to pick the injured McClary from Elsfield Way. So the governor called the Radcliffe Hospital, and then he realizes that there was nobody that was picked up, because when the ambulance reached the Elsfield Way, there was no sign of an injured man or an injured McClary. It was then that the governor understood everything. He realized that it had not been Evans impersonating McClary who had walked out. It had been Evans impersonating McClary who had stayed in. This is the point when the governor realizes that the McClary who was injured was actually Evans. Now there's a question that rises here. Why did Evans not walk out as the McClary who was escorted by Stephens? The whole idea behind that was, he says that he loves adventure, he loves challenges, and therefore he thought why to escape in a manner which was very easy. And that was one of the reasons he did not even escape from the recreational block as well, the D block. Okay, the recreational block. So this is a question that the governor asks, and we as readers also ask, why did Evans not escape when it was easy? Because towards the end he says, we thought of throwing a few spanners in works. So he thought of adding a little thrill and adventure to his escape. So here the governor comes to a conclusion. He realizes that he has now gone to Newbury. He realizes the injured McClary was Evans, and he finds the Golden Lion. The Golden Lion was the indication of which hotel to be at. Through that indication was given, that information was given through the correction slip. So he reaches the Golden Lion, and the worst things for funny. Now here in this we find that Evans is very casually walking up to his hotel, and he looks back at all the good luck and the bad luck he had. When Jackson had taken away his scissors, he had to shorten his hair, closely crop his hair only with the razor blade. That was tough. But he had his good luck also, because Jackson had asked him to take off his bobble hat, and looking at his hair closely cropped, he would have been a bit suspicious. But when Jackson allowed him to wear his bobble hat for good luck, that was a part of his good luck as well. So that was a close call. So he recalls all that, and he's a bit relaxed. He doesn't expect the governor to be sitting there. Okay? Because on the next page we'll find at the hotel, this very hotel where he has come to, the governor would be sitting on his bed. And he also realizes that the beard which he had to stick to his face to impersonate as McClary was also something very tricky for him, because he was allergic to the sticking plaster. The sticking plaster refers to the glue which helped the beard to stick to him. Now the receptionist wasn't the same girl who booked him in, so even the receptionist had been changed by the governor, because later onwards the governor says there are people around him, but and he's changed to people, so that receptionist wasn't the same girl, but he thought that it was for better because this receptionist was much better looking than the previous one. He, as he collected his key, he gave her his best smile and told her that he wouldn't be bothering with breakfast because he has to leave early in the morning. Now he whistled softly to himself as he walked up the broad stairs, and then suddenly he recalls how he wore 2 collars, how the collar kept on slipping off, and McClary always had to keep his index finger under the 2 collars to keep them up. They had got that little problem worked out all right, though the pen stuck in the mouth was, I told you, the way whenever Stephen looked into the cell, he always saw that Evans was sitting in a specific manner. That was just a way of indicating to McClary that he need not pass the things to him at that particular time, because the evil eye refers to Stephen's eye, was peeping into the hole. So all that fiddling under the blanket with the black front and the stud and the back of the collar was difficult. It was not something easy. And then everything had gone well, and of course he had found soap and water and clothes and the map in the car that picked him up from Elsfield Way, that picked him up from Elsfield Way after Detective Carter had dropped him there. Now the map was important because at the beginning of the question paper the coordinates of the place where he had to go to was given. So the map was also found in that car. So he had got some good friends outside. So definitely he had accomplices. And the most important accomplice was the German teacher, which the governor had never cross-checked. So he unlocked his bedroom and then he froze to the spot because it seemed as if he had seen a big monster. Gorgon is a monster. So he was rooted to his spot, and then it was the governor. Now the governor was playing very, very haughty at this time, because he said that he had men around the place, but actually there were 2. It's like scaring him. And then he said, women too, didn't you think the blonde girl in the reception was rather sweet? So the girl which was changed was actually an accomplice of the governor now. So Evans was visibly shaken. He didn't expect this, but now we also realize that this also was an act, because he had also had a plan B intact in case the governor was able to find him at Golden Line. So I feel even this was a act of his. So finally he said, oh God, it was a bloody correction slip that gave you the name of the hotel, Golden Line. But he said that it was very fine that the governor was easily able to understand the correction slip, because he says that very few people know a little German. So because of his knowledge of German, he was able to identify that the slip had quoted these terms of Golden Line. So slowly he was relaxed, he was beaten, and then he said that the correction slip wasn't actually a mistake. He said that this was just a way of indicating which hotel, that had to be told to him in specific. And the other reason was that they needed to know when the exam had started, because the last 3 minutes of the exam were important, where Stephen had to be called away from the cell so that final exchanges of impersonation could be done. So he says that like a fool, I presented you with that little piece of information on a plate. The governor says that I presented it on a plate, on a platter to you. And he said, see the correction slip. How did the correction slip kill two little birds with a single stone? He said that it did because it gave me the name of the Golden Lion, and it also gave me the exact time the exam started, so that my accomplice outside could make that call and for Stephens at the correct time. So somehow he was able to find that. And Oxfordshire, I had earlier told you that these numbers were coordinates of the map where he could find the location of the hotel. And the question paper, Evans, could you really understand all that German? He said, of course not. In the beginning also, if you look at the part 1 video, in the beginning also, you'll find that when the German teacher says good luck, he doesn't understand it, and he gives a reply, thank you, in German with great difficulty. So he thought that he should also learn German so that he could also act and add a few spanners in the works. That means add a little more charm. So the governor stood up. Tell me one thing before you go. How on earth did you get that blood to pour over? So the blood was carried by the McClary who walked in, and that blood was in the little rubber ring for piles. Earlier I had told you that blood was a combination of pig's blood and human blood mixed with 1/10 of its own volume of 3.8% trisodium citrate. So this was supposed to enable the blood to refrain from coagulating. So the governor was really found it admirable, and he did not hesitate to accept that even at this time, after so many years of experience, they learn something every day. So Evans made no show of resistance. He didn't show any resistance when the governor had captured him and was taking him down the stairs. And he says that he had one more question, and the governor asked Evans that, tell us, how did you get all this plan intact? You never had any outside visitors. And it is then that Evans discloses that the German teacher was his main contact, and it is then that the governor feels really upset, because he realized that he did not properly check the credentials of the the German teacher, and he realizes that it was a big mistake. So when we say whether he was a good for a giggle, gullible governor, this is the first thing he should have done. He should have checked the credentials of the German teacher, because the German teacher had actually enabled all the plans in the outside world. Now he goes down along with the governor, and there is a prison officer. The term silent should raise some curiosity as a reader, because he handcuffed Evans, and then the two men clambered awkwardly into the backside of the prison, the other men, and the governor did not accompany the prison van. Now that's another mistake he did. He should have accompanied them and ensured the identity of the reader. But here he doesn't do that again. And then Evans, while leaving, says that, I hope you don't know any other language. So the governor is unable to understand that, and he says, not really, and asks, why is he asking that? He says, because I am thinking of taking some O-level Italian classes in prison next time. And then, even then, the governor is unable to understand that, because he says, you may not be with us next September, Evans. There's a possibility you might be executed, and there could be some serious charge against you. You could be shifted to another prison. And then James Broderick Evans says, no, perhaps I won't, because he actually knew that even from here he's going to escape from the governor's clutches. And why? Because the prison van driver. He says, where do you suggest we make for, in a broad Scots accent? Why does the broad Scots accent stand out? Because this is the same man who had impersonated as McCleary, and this is, the driver is actually McCleary. So the prison van was the van which was called for at the beginning of the chapter when Evans was giving the exam. The same prison van was overtaken by Evans' accomplices, and this was his plan B just in case he got caught. So this comes as a surprise to us as a reader also. Why? Because we never expected him to go this far, that in case he is even caught at Golden Lion, what would be his plan of action. So definitely this has been a very, very interesting chapter, and I hope you all have enjoyed it and have understood. In case there are any queries, you can message them at in the area below the link, and I hope you will benefit from this video. So keep visiting this channel. There will be more uploads definitely before the board exams, and I wish you good luck.